Goku and the gang have finally arrived in the third demon realm and prepare to swarm the castle of Gomah to put an end to the story. On today's Dragon Ball Daima episode breakdown for episode 15, we're going to go into a bunch of stuff jam-packed with information about the third eye and the whole history behind that. We have a big segment on that. We're going to talk about the Sandland and Dragon Quest references, as well as a ton of extra things that you may have missed, because there might not have been too much that happened, but there was a lot beneath the surface in this episode that I think counted for more. But before we begin the breakdown today, here's a word from our sponsor. Rather than spending hours and hours scouring the web trying to find an unbiased source of world news, the search is over once you discover Straight Arrow News. Whether you're checking out the app on your mobile device or on a browser on a PC, Straight Arrow News has just the facts right at your fingertips, without concern of being lied to and manipulated like the mainstream media so often has done to us. Regardless of what side of the political spectrum you're on, Straight Arrow News has something for you, and it's a place you can trust to find all the information you need. Head on over to san.com/geekdom or click the link in the description and see for yourself. Goku and the gang's confrontation with Gomah's empire is reminiscent of two different things. One of them is obviously Star Wars and the various blaster battles that we see throughout the series between different factions, while Goku here plays the Jedi, deflecting blasts with his Nioibo, aka Power Pole, until he actually gets hit by one. Now, I criticized this in my review for Dragon Ball Daima episode 15 because at this point, I don't really understand how this could hurt Goku, but the only explanation I can think of is that these blasts are magic based, and that's why it hurts him more. However, one of my other criticisms was he could have gone Super Saiyan to wipe them out. We see that later on in the episode. Either way, this breakdown is really about things you missed, and I've already covered a lot of this in my review. Clearly here we have Glorio in the Han Solo role, Pansy in the Princess Leia role, which we've talked about many times in these breakdowns, and we have Goku trying to be the Jedi. Of course, Vegeta and Piccolo are using their blast too. The other thing this is kind of reminiscent of is like watching a Western, because they have that same type of shootout style. So Vegeta also tries to jump in there and he gets caught just like Goku did and has to take one of the revive bugs to heal him back up. The demon realm equivalent of a Senzu bean. Goku brings up the fact that dealing with this problem with this army is an issue inside of a kid's body. It feels to me like this is not really well thought out, because while I understand that was a problem earlier in the arc when they first got to the demon realm, by now they should be well accustomed to those bodies. We've seen them use Super Saiyan 2 and Super Saiyan 3 effectively and respectively, so it shouldn't really be an issue. However, I will maybe give them the benefit of the doubt in that it could be that Demon World 1, specifically the one they just got to now, they have to get reaccustomed to that atmosphere because it may differ from the other two demon worlds they were already in. Gomah's dreams are about to come true as he notices that Hybis has the third eye. It was established back in Dragon Ball Daima episode 9 that Hybis had this third eye. Maybe it was episode 8. It was a few episodes ago. And that it was indeed the same third eye that was mentioned all the way back in episode 1 of Dragon Ball Daima, this ancient artifact that grants the Demon Kings an incredibly high amount of power and allows them to rule. It was confirmed in this episode that it is indeed the same eye that Hybis found. I really enjoyed seeing Goku and the others battle it out against the army. It sort of reminded me of some of the stuff from the Red Ribbon Army arc of Dragon Ball when Goku was invading the base, except this time he wasn't alone. Vegeta was there, Gloria was there, you had a whole crew there to help him out, and it just felt like complete pandemonium and was a lot of fun to watch. Yes, I had issues with the episode, but this is one of the more fun sequences in my opinion. We then go into flashback mode where we find out that the Supreme Demon King Abura, the father of Dabura, was one of the ones that originally had this third eye and used it to reign. Now the name pun, as we've talked about before, is Abra, and of course Dabura's is Dabra. Even though it's Dabura in the English dub, it's supposed to be pronounced Dabura. So the pun is Abura Kadabura. It's all about magic, isn't it? Now, with King Kadan coming into the picture later in the episode, I guess you can squeeze that in there and have it be the full abracadabra pun if you wanted to. Remember that every name in Dragon Ball is based on some kind of pun from something. In the Demon Realm, a lot of the names are based on flowers. Saiyan names are obviously based on vegetables. You know how it goes. Gomah orders Degasu to get that third eye for him. When we actually get to the flashback, you hear a narrator's voice. This is not the traditional narrator that replaced Joe Giannami during Dragon Ball Super and did the opening narrations for Daima. This is basically the voice of Dabura, not the original one because Daisuke Gori voiced him and he passed away as well. The newer Dabura explaining the backstory of the third eye. Most of the information given here is stuff that has already been hinted at or straight up said, and I've been talking about in numerous recent streams about how this third eye will grant someone incredible power and that it will figure into the final battle of Dragon Ball Daima. This is now the beginning of the final stretch of the series, so now it's time to explain to the viewer why this matters and why you should care. Now, there are a number of Demon Kings that are shown in the background, and you really have to pause it to get a good look at who these guys are. But a couple of these really stuck out to me. For example, the final one right there, we went ahead and were able to brighten up the image, and while I think a lot of people are going to assume that this is reminiscent of Majin Ozato, which many of you may know from Dragon Ball Heroes or some of the other Dragon Ball games. He really made his name in the mid-90s during an arcade Dragon Ball game called Dragon Ball VR VS that is very rare and virtually nobody in the West has played it because it came out so long ago. He came from that, but upon closer inspection, this looks identical. The outline looks identical to the Archfiend Zoma, the lead antagonist for Dragon Quest III. Now, I discussed in the past about how many Dragon Quest references there are, but Zoma, without going into spoilers, is an Archfiend and a black magician with incredible power, and he also has a giant third eye in his forehead that grants him power. The third eye isn't really an artifact in Dragon Quest, but the lore behind the idea of a third eye is something that goes back centuries. Now, I could do an entire video on just the origins of the so-called evil eye or third eye. In many different belief systems, occult belief systems, Judeo-Christian belief systems, there's talk of an evil eye. Some have called it the third eye of Horus, which is supposed to bring about negative influence and curses. However, it's difficult to say whether or not Toriyama borrowed this from those sources. Dragon Ball has borrowed from all types of different religions and mythologies all over the world, but seems to be mostly Eastern based. Now, when the idea of the third eye was first introduced, a lot of people pointed to Ten Shinhan from Dragon Ball because he has a third eye. I want to tell you now that Ten Shinhan has absolutely no relation to the third eye of Dragon Ball Daima. However, both of these concepts may have been borrowed and probably were borrowed from the same original source. Even though a lot of Western religions and mythologies consider the third eye something bad, in the East, the third eye is not necessarily something that represents evil or bad deeds. The third eye is often seen as a symbol of enlightenment. Toriyama himself once said that in certain parts of Asia, beings with a third eye on their forehead are thought to be godlike and are said to possess the power of true seeing. Now, a lot of this is, of course, based on Journey to the West. And there's a popular Chinese deity named Erlang Shen. He has a third eye on the center of his forehead. And he's actually able to defeat Sun Wukong in battle because of his third eye. Is that a premonition of things to come? Very likely in the next few weeks, I'll be getting with Jordan the Dragon Lee to do a much more in-depth look at Erlang Shen and at the third eye from Journey to the West and how it relates to Gomah, the third eye of the great demon kings in the demon realm, and Dragon Ball Daima. Because honestly, I could do an entire video on just the representation of this singular eye throughout all culture. This incredible scene where we actually see the third eye in use and how it explains the incredible power that the third eye gives you is very reminiscent of the scene from the very first Dragon Ball Z movie known as Dead Zone that shows the backstory of Garlic Sr. This is more of an artistic touch. There's not really that much of a connection, but I love when anime does this type of stuff. There's a film called Vampire Hunter D that many of you have seen and many of you have not. If you've not seen it, I highly recommend seeing it because it's a true anime classic that uses this style right here to perfection. One of the big revelations is that we found out exactly how the third eye went missing. It turns out that Dabura betrayed his own father. He took the third eye, gave it to one of his henchmen, and told him to hide it in the third demon world where it would be much harder for Abura to find it, because he wanted the power all to himself at some point. This henchman was able to escape the forces of Demon World 1 and make it to Demon World 3. However, one of the ogres there whacked him and the eyeball was lost. This would have been hundreds of years ago. Now, the scene where Dabura is on the throne when he took over the demon realm, this scene is awesome because we see Gomah there, but what does this remind you of? This looks like almost, not exactly, but almost a shot-for-shot comparison to Lucifer from Sandland. Now, a lot of people have mistakenly said that Lucifer and Dabura are the same character. I've seen a lot of comments that state this, and that is incorrect. That is false. Lucifer and Dabura are not the same guy, but they share a very, very similar design. Very similar, in fact, but they're not the same guy. It's kind of like how a lot of Toriyama's characters from Slump look like characters from Dragon Ball, etc., etc. It's just his style. This feels like a direct reference to Sandland by showing him on the throne similarly to Lucifer. Dabura was able to overthrow his father, but it wouldn't last. Once Babidi came to the demon realm to recruit Dabura, he wound up going to Earth, and once Majin Buu was hatched, he became Majin Buu's special dessert. Then Daima literally shows us Hibis sometime later finding the missing eye after all these years somewhere in a forest in Demon World 3. Also, did you notice that the way that Hibis found the third eye is very reminiscent of the way that Smeagol found the One Ring in Lord of the Rings? Here we have this ancient artifact that was accidentally dropped for the most part and found by the most unlikeliest person. As far as when the events took place, about when the third eye was dropped, like how long ago it was, because the servant of Dabura used the tunnels to go between the demon realms and not Sir Warp, that would mean that these events occurred before Neva put up the magic shield barrier, which would imply literally millions of years ago. I had no clue that Dabura was that old until this episode. I really hope that someday they give us a full timeline of events of the demon realm and how they go into the creation of the multiverse step by step, because that would be very helpful for us to really sort of have a complete understanding of the order that these things happened in. Goku and the gang finally make it to the palace, but they are under attack by the guards, which is a big army still working for Gomah, protecting him. While the fighting is going on, this demon girl at the village, who kind of looks a little bit like a witch, tries to trade Hybis a kiss for the belt buckle with the third eye on it. Hybis does not want a kiss, but he does want her hat, and he gives it up. He has no idea what he's just done, because now the third eye is in the hands of a witch that may or may not be working for Degasu, but it's not going to be in the hands of the good guys anymore, and well, we kind of know what's going to happen. I actually completely forgot that back on September 11th, I discussed Hybis's hat. I have seen some behind the scenes production material of Hybis wearing that hat, but I completely forgot about it. I thought that, you know, when I had first saw it, we would see it earlier in the series, but now everything makes sense. This is how he gets the hat and how he loses the third eye. That mistake is going to cost them. The trio of Goku, Vegeta, and Piccolo then set out for a full contact assault to get rid of these guys all at once. As the trio do their thing, the secret weapon of the military police is revealed. These 3 gigantic tanks. Now, in the past, I've talked about how much of a big history buff Toriyama is and how much he used to love World War II weapons, but I don't think this is in reference to that. No, this is clearly another reference, or at least a similar idea behind the tanks in Sandland. Battle tanks in Sandland are a big part of their iconography and one of the most memorable parts about that series. One of the tanks blasts the trio with an EMP and manages to electrocute them, causing harm to their bodies. They're about to fire one more fatal blow, but then out of nowhere, a wasabi bomb is dropped on the tank. Now, if you remember, wasabi bombs go all the way back to Dragon Ball Daima episode 4. This is the bomb that Pansy used at the end of the episode that malfunctioned. It seems like this is something that her entire family has access to, because then we find out the source of the wasabi bombs was indeed her father, King Kadan from Demon World 3. He has come with his recruits to save the day. I mentioned in my review that this kind of reminded me of the scene in Lord of the Rings where Gandalf shows up with his army to help everybody fight off in the Battle of Gondor, the army of Sauron. Also, it kind of reminds me a little bit of some of the scenes in Avengers Endgame where you have somebody showing up to help with another army to assist in this big battle. It certainly didn't feel like Dragon Ball, and I enjoyed that. And I'll be honest, I liked the episode more the second time I viewed it. I still had issues with it, but it made more sense as to why these magic attacks in the demon realm hurt Goku and the rest of them more. I still think they could have written around it better, and I still think the episode had issues, but it's more enjoyable upon second viewing. When you look at the credits, it reveals the names of King Kadan's troops, and one of them, which is the guy with the mallet, is named Kate Sith. That's right, this is the exact same name of the Kate Sith character from Final Fantasy VII, another JRPG series alongside Dragon Quest, which I'm sure the vast majority of you have either played or at least heard of. But the name did not originate in Final Fantasy VII. It's actually an ancient Celtic cat fairy, but it still surprised me. At this point, everyone joins in on the battle. King Kadan's forces, Goku, Vegeta, Piccolo, Glorio, Pansy, they all do their best to fight off the remaining warriors guarding the castle. This sequence is absolutely electric with incredible transitions, incredible directing and camera work, and everybody got a little bit of shine. It was really, really well executed. Seeing Piccolo and Vegeta work together back to back is something I've wanted to see for a long time, and we got it right here with Dragon Ball Daima. Like I said, this episode was a lot more enjoyable the second time because I got to really appreciate things like this. Then finally Goku did what he should have done from the very beginning and went Super Saiyan to quickly dispatch of these guys. Goku's speed and power were too much, and he easily made jobbers out of all the remaining military police. Meanwhile, Gomah is losing his mind, but Degasu reminds him they've still got the bootleg Ginyu Force to fall back on. The final shot of the episode gives us a glimpse at the castle where they're headed to next as the final battle approaches. The next episode is called Degasu and likely will be circled around him and his confrontation with his brother Shin. First time they've seen each other in many hundreds of years. Here he is pointing a gun right at sleeping baby Dende. So I don't know if this guy's going to have a redemption arc or not, but it should be a very interesting episode nonetheless as things pick up more next week. At least I certainly hope so. I hope you enjoyed this breakdown. As always, check out the content here on this channel right now on your screen. Was Cell actually a Super Saiyan in Dragon Ball Z? A breakdown on the afterlife and how it actually works, as well as a discussion about the future of Dragon Ball without Toriyama. Check them out.